The old train station at the edge of town had been abandoned for decades, its tracks rusted, its platforms silent. Yet locals whispered of strange lights that flickered inside after midnight, lanterns swinging in empty halls, trains arriving that no one had boarded in years. Curious wanderers entered, hoping to solve the mystery. But by morning, the station always stood empty again, its doors locked tight, the lights gone, along with those who had dared to enter. The Hollowbrook train station had once been the beating heart of the town. In the early 1900s, its platforms bustled with life. Families greeting loved ones, travelers setting off with suitcases in hand, the whistle of trains echoing through the valley. But when the line was shut down in the 1960s, the station closed. Over time, its glass roof shattered, weeds grew through the tracks, and the building fell into ruin. Yet even abandoned, Hollowbrook never slept. Locals whispered of strange sightings, lights flickering in the station long after dark. The echo of train whistles carried on windless nights, and most chilling of all, the sound of footsteps on the platform when no one was there. Some claimed they saw a train arrive, its windows glowing faintly, before vanishing into the mist. Most people avoided the place, but for Jason, Lauren and Mark, three friends with a taste for dares and urban exploration, it was irresistible. On a brisk autumn evening, they slipped through the broken fence and onto the overgrown tracks. The air was still, unnaturally quiet, as if the forest surrounding the station was holding its breath. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, beams bouncing off shattered glass and rusted beams. "There it is," Jason said, pointing ahead. The station loomed out of the dark, its stone archway cracked, its windows black and hollow. A faded clock hung above the entrance, its hands frozen at midnight. Lauren shivered, tugging her jacket tighter. "Why does it always have to be midnight?" Mark grinned. "Because midnight's when the ghosts come out." Jason rolled his eyes but kept walking, pushing open the heavy wooden doors. They creaked loudly, echoing through the cavernous hall. Dust swirled in the air as they stepped inside. The interior was worse than they'd expected. Benches lay overturned, their wood splintered. Ticket windows were shattered, the glass spiderwebbed with cracks. The grand chandelier that had once hung from the ceiling lay broken on the floor, its crystal shards glittering faintly in their flashlight beams. Yet despite the ruin, the air carried a strange scent, smoke, faint but unmistakable, as though a train had just passed through. Lauren wrinkled her nose. "Do you smell that?" Jason nodded, his expression tightening. "Coal smoke." Mark laughed nervously. "Impossible. The line's been dead for 60 years. They wandered deeper, their footsteps echoing across the marble floor. Every sound seemed amplified, bouncing back at them, as though the building itself were listening. When they reached the platform, they froze. The tracks stretched into the fog, endless and empty. But the platform lights, dark for decades, flickered to life. One by one, the bulbs glowed faintly, buzzing with electricity that shouldn't exist. Lauren's breath hitched. "Jason, did you see that?" Before he could answer, the sound came. A whistle, distant but clear, cutting through the silence. The three friends stared into the fog. Another whistle, louder this time. The ground trembled faintly beneath their feet, as though something massive approached. Mark swallowed hard. "No way, that's not possible." The lights grew brighter, stretching down the platform in a perfect line. And then, in the distance, two beams of light pierced the fog, moving toward them. Jason whispered. "The train." The whistle blew again, deafening now, and the platform shook as the impossible locomotive roared into view. The locomotive screeched to a halt, its steel wheels grinding against the rusted tracks. Sparks flew, illuminating the fog in bursts of light. Jason, Lauren and Mark stumbled backward, shielding their faces from the blast of air that followed. The train was massive, its frame blackened with soot, its windows glowing faintly with a pale, unnatural light. Steam hissed from its pipes, filling the platform with a thick mist. The three friends stood frozen, hearts pounding. "Tell me you're seeing this too," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. Jason nodded slowly, his eyes wide. "We all are." The whistle shrieked again, rattling the glass in the broken windows of the station. The doors of the train creaked open, revealing a dark interior bathed in dim, flickering light. Lauren grabbed Jason's arm. "Don't even think about it." But something about the train pulled at them, an invisible gravity urging them forward. The open doors seemed to beckon, promising answers to questions no one should ask. A shadow shifted inside one of the windows. A figure. It stood perfectly still, watching them. Its face was obscured by the glow, but its outline was unmistakable. Tall, human, waiting. Lauren's breath hitched. "There's someone on it." Mark forced a laugh, though his voice cracked. "An actor. Has to be. Some stupid setup." Jason shook his head. "No one's run trains here in 60 years. The figure moved closer to the door. Its hand lifted slowly, unnaturally, as if each movement was pulled by invisible strings. It beckoned them forward. Lauren clutched Jason tighter. "We're not going in there," but the platform itself seemed to shift beneath their feet, pulling them closer. The lights overhead buzzed violently, casting the station in harsh, stuttering flashes. Each time the light flickered, the figure appeared closer, until it stood just inside the open doorway. Its face was still hidden, but when the light hit its eyes, they glowed faintly. Not with life, but with emptiness. Jason swallowed hard. "We have to go now." They turned toward the exit, but the heavy wooden doors slammed shut with a thunderous crack. Dust rained from the ceiling as the locks clattered into place on their own. Trapped, the whistle blew again, deafening. The ground shook violently, throwing them to their knees. Steam poured across the platform, swallowing them in heat and mist. When it cleared, the train doors had closed. The locomotive sat silent, its windows still glowing. The figure was gone. Lauren's voice trembled. Maybe it left. But the train hadn't moved. The clock above the platform struck midnight, its hands jerking back and forth before settling. The lights flickered again, dimming until the entire station was cast in darkness. Then came the sound, footsteps. Not from the platform, from inside the station hall behind them. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The three friends turned toward the sound, flashlights trembling in their hands. Their beams cut through the dark, sweeping across broken benches and shattered glass. At first the hall was empty. Then, one by one, the benches began to shift. Dust fell as they scraped across the marble floor, sliding on their own. The chandeliers above rattled, shards of crystal clinking together like teeth. Jason's voice cracked. "We're not alone." From the far end of the hall, a figure stepped into view. It wore a conductor's uniform, tattered and blackened with soot. Its face was pale, blurred, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. In one hand, it held a rusted lantern that flickered with the same pale light as the train's windows. It raised the lantern high, its voice a hollow whisper carried across the hall. "Tickets, please." The words echoed unnaturally, rattling through the vast hall like metal dragged across stone. "Tickets, please." Jason, Lauren and Mark froze, their flashlights quivering in their hands. The conductor's lantern cast a sickly glow, stretching shadows that seemed to move independently of the light. His uniform was torn, buttons missing, the cap tilted crooked on his head. But it was his face that chilled them most. It wasn't just pale, it was blurred, as though his features had been smeared like wet paint. Only his eyes glowed faintly, hollow orbs of white. Lauren clutched Jason's sleeve. "We don't have tickets. Let's just get out." But the doors behind them were still sealed, locked by some unseen force. The conductor began to walk forward, each step deliberate, the sound of his boots striking the marble far louder than it should have been. "Tickets," he repeated, his voice lower now, vibrating in their bones. Mark tried to force a laugh, though his voice cracked. "This is some prank, right? Some haunted house thing." But Jason's gut told him otherwise. The air had grown cold, their breath visible in the beams of their flashlights, and the closer the conductor came, the more the world seemed to bend, walls stretching, shadows deepening, the station warping like a mirage. Jason stepped in front of the others. "We're leaving," he said firmly, his voice shaking despite himself. "We're not passengers." The conductor stopped just a few feet away. Slowly, he raised the lantern higher, the pale flame inside flickering violently. "Everyone is a passenger." The chandeliers above rattled violently, raining shards of glass to the floor. Benches scraped backward across the hall, slamming against the walls as if shoved by invisible hands. The sound was deafening, a roar of movement in an otherwise empty space. Lauren screamed as the lantern light flared. For a moment, the entire hall transformed. The broken glass was whole again, the benches filled with people dressed in 1920s clothing, women in dresses, men in hats, children clutching toys. The entire station was alive, buzzing with chatter and laughter. Then, just as quickly, the image shattered. The hall returned to ruin, and the benches were empty once more. The conductor tilted his head sharply. Boarding begins now. The whistle shrieked again, this time inside the hall itself. Steam burst from the cracks in the floor, pouring upward in choking clouds. Through the haze, Jason glimpsed something impossible. The train was no longer outside, it was in the hall, its massive black frame stretching impossibly through the walls. Doors slid open, glowing faintly, the same pale figures visible inside, seated silently, staring out with blank faces. Lauren sobbed, clutching Jason's arm. "We're not getting on that. I won't." But Mark's eyes were wide, his face pale. "If we don't, what happens?" The conductor's blurred face twisted, forming something like a grin. "No one leaves Hollowbrook without a ticket." He extended a hand, palm up, and in his gloved fingers, 3 faded stubs of paper appeared, edges burnt, ink smeared. The names were faint but visible. Jason Moore, Lauren Wright, Mark Davis. The tickets were already written. The sight of their names printed on the faded stubs made Lauren's stomach twist. She shook her head violently. No, that's not real. I never bought a ticket." The conductor tilted his head, the lantern light flaring across his blurred face. "Every soul pays the fare." His voice was hollow, layered, as if dozens of voices spoke the same words from inside his chest. Jason stepped forward, his fists clenched though his hands trembled. "We're not getting on that train." The conductor's glow dimmed. His voice sank into a chilling whisper. "Everyone boards eventually." Suddenly the ground trembled. The rusted clock above the hall struck midnight again, its frozen hands jerking violently back and forth. The sound of gears grinding echoed through the station, though the clock hadn't worked in decades. From the platform, the whistle screamed once more. The train's lights blazed, flooding the broken windows with pale illumination. Steam poured through the hall, thick and choking, obscuring everything but the faint glow of the conductor's lantern. Mark coughed, covering his mouth. We need to hide." But there was nowhere to run. The benches scraped back into place, forming neat rows as if preparing for passengers. Shadows flickered in the seats, faint outlines of people long gone. The station was filling, not with life, but with echoes of the dead. Lauren's sob caught in her throat. "They're boarding." Figures emerged from the fog, dozens of them, translucent, dressed in clothes decades out of time. Their faces were blurred, their eyes empty. They clutched suitcases, newspapers, toys, moving silently toward the platform. None of them acknowledged the 3 friends. They walked straight through them, cold air washing over their skin like icy water. Jason grabbed Lauren's arm, pulling her back. "Don't touch them." But Mark stumbled as one figure brushed past him. His flashlight flickered violently, and for an instant he saw himself reflected in the pale passenger's hollow eyes. His breath caught in his chest, frozen. Jason yanked him upright. "Stay with us." The crowd of phantoms moved toward the glowing train doors, boarding silently, one after another. Each time a figure passed inside, the pale light of the windows grew brighter, as if the train was feeding on them. The conductor turned his hollow gaze back to the friends. "Your train is waiting." Jason shook his head, his voice cracking. "We're not passengers. We never will be." The lantern light flared violently. The conductor's blurred grin widened. "You already are." He lifted the tickets, and the ink burned brighter, searing their names into the paper. The stubs curled at the edges, glowing as though written in fire. The train's whistle screamed again, deafening, shaking the walls. Cracks split the marble floor, steam pouring through the fissures, like breath from the earth itself. Lauren clung to Jason, sobbing. "What do we do?" Jason's chest heaved, panic clawing at his throat. He looked toward the great wooden doors of the station. For the first time since they'd closed, they rattled against their locks. Something was shifting outside. Hope flared in his eyes. "The doors. We can make it." Mark stumbled toward them, coughing through the steam. "Go, now!" The 3 friends sprinted across the hall, dodging shards of falling glass as the chandeliers swayed violently overhead. The conductor didn't follow. He only raised his lantern, and the glow behind them swelled, filling the hall with unbearable light. They slammed against the doors. To their shock, they creaked open, revealing the night air beyond. Cold fog spilled in, but beyond it, the trees and the moonlit town were visible. For a moment, freedom seemed within reach. But as they shoved the doors wide, the whistle blew again, closer this time, and when they turned back, the train was no longer on the platform. It was in the doorway. The massive locomotive filled the doorway, its black steel frame impossible in size, stretching through the entrance as though the walls of the station bent around it. Steam hissed from its pipes, flooding the hall with mist. The pale light from its windows spilled across the marble floor, throwing long shadows that writhed like living things. Jason froze, his voice breaking. "It can't. How can it fit here?" Lauren backed away, clutching his arm. "It's not real. It can't be real." But the heat radiating from the engine, the stench of coal and ash, it all felt horrifyingly real. The doors of the nearest car slid open with a hiss. Inside, rows of empty seats waited, glowing faintly in the unnatural light. A single silhouette sat near the back, perfectly still. Mark's chest heaved. "It's waiting for us." Jason shook his head violently. "We're not getting on that thing." The whistle shrieked, rattling every window. The chandeliers above crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. Steam surged forward, pushing them closer to the open car. The conductor's voice echoed, though he was nowhere in sight. "Boarding is required." The shadows on the walls twisted, elongating into human shapes. Dozens of faceless figures stepped forward, their movements jerky, their empty eyes glowing faintly. They reached with long, pale hands, herding the three friends toward the train. Lauren screamed, clutching Jason's sleeve. "They're forcing us." Jason shoved one of the figures, but his hand passed through like smoke. The figure still pressed forward, its cold weight driving him back. Mark stumbled, nearly falling into the open car. His flashlight clattered to the floor, beam cutting across the seats. For a moment he saw them filled, not with shadows but with passengers. Pale men, women and children, their blurred faces turned toward him, their mouths opening in perfect unison. Their whisper filled the hall. "Join us." Mark staggered back, but Jason grabbed his arm, pulling him away. "Don't look at them." The train groaned, its metal frame shuddering. The glow inside the car flared, and the shadows grew thicker, swarming like smoke. Lauren cried out, pointing to the far wall. "There's stairs." Through the steam, Jason saw it. A staircase leading down to the lower level of the station, half collapsed but still intact. Without thinking, he pulled the others toward it. The figures lurched after them, their whispers growing louder. The whistle screamed again, so close it made their ears bleed. They stumbled down the stairs, the marble steps slick with condensation. The basement of the station stretched into darkness, filled with the skeletons of old storage rooms and coal bins. Their flashlights flickered, beams cutting across rusted pipes and broken crates. For a moment it was silent. Then the lantern light appeared at the top of the stairs. The conductor stood there, his blurred face turned toward them. His voice rolled down the stairwell, layered and hollow. "You cannot leave. The train always takes its passengers." Jason's heart pounded in his ears. He looked at Lauren and Mark, their faces pale, their breaths ragged. "We keep moving. We don't stop. Not for anything." They plunged deeper into the dark, their footsteps echoing, but the sound was wrong. It doubled, tripled, until it seemed like dozens of footsteps followed them, closing in from all directions. When their lights steadied, they realized why. The basement was no longer empty. Figures lined the walls, shoulder to shoulder, endless rows of faceless passengers waiting silently in the dark. Their glowing eyes turned in unison, following every step the three friends took, and somewhere ahead, in the depths of the station, a new whistle blew. This one low, rumbling, as if the train had already arrived in the tunnels below. The whistle rumbled through the basement, deep and resonant, vibrating in their chests. Jason, Lauren and Mark froze, their flashlights trembling as beams swept across the endless rows of faceless figures pressed against the walls. None moved, yet all stared, glowing eyes fixed on them. Lauren's voice cracked. "They're waiting, like passengers." Jason forced his breath steady. "We're not part of this. We don't have to be." But the words felt hollow in the cold, stale air. They hurried forward, weaving through broken beams and rusted machinery. Water dripped from the ceiling, each drop echoing like a countdown. The deeper they went, the louder the whistle grew, until the very ground seemed to pulse with the sound. Then the tunnel opened into a vast underground platform. It looked impossibly preserved. Brass lamps glowed faintly along the walls, casting golden light on tiled floors that gleamed as if freshly polished. Benches stood in neat rows, empty and waiting. And at the far end, another train waited, sleek, black, its windows blazing with pale fire. Mark's stomach dropped. "There's another one." Lauren shook her head violently. "No, it's the same train. It followed us down here." Jason scanned the platform, desperate for an exit. On the far wall, a set of iron doors stood half buried in debris, a possible escape. But before they could move, the train doors opened with a hiss. Figures spilled out. Not pale, faceless shades, but passengers dressed in clothing from every era. A woman in a Victorian gown, a soldier in a Watwai uniform, a child clutching a toy from the 1950s. Dozens of them stepped onto the platform, their faces blurred, their eyes empty. They didn't walk toward the exit. They lined up in silence, as if waiting for something. Then the whistle shrieked, deafening. The conductor emerged from the nearest car, his lantern glowing brighter than before. His blurred face tilted toward them, his voice booming through the underground chamber. Final boarding, all passengers present. Jason grabbed Lauren and Mark, dragging them toward the iron doors. The conductor's lantern flared, and instantly the figures on the platform turned their heads in unison. They began to march forward, blocking the path. The three friends shoved through, the cold passing through their bodies like knives as the shades brushed against them. Mark stumbled, falling to his knees. Jason pulled him up, shouting over the roar of the whistle, "Don't stop!" They reached the doors. Jason threw his shoulder against them. Rust groaned, iron scraping, but they didn't budge. Behind them, the platform swarmed with passengers, closing in. The conductor raised his lantern high, and the light burst outward like a wave, striking them with blinding force. Lauren screamed, covering her eyes. "It's burning!" Jason shielded her, teeth gritted against the pain. The light wasn't just blinding, it was pulling, dragging them toward the train. His body leaned against his will, his legs stumbling forward on their own. Mark's voice was hoarse. "It's making us bored," Jason roared, slamming into the doors again. This time the rusted metal gave, shifting open just enough to reveal darkness beyond. He shoved Lauren through, then Mark, before forcing himself inside. The doors slammed shut behind them. They stumbled into blackness, gasping, their flashlights flickering weakly. The roar of the whistle was muffled now, distant but still present. Lauren clutched Jason's arm, trembling. "Where are we?" Jason raised his light. The beam cut across stone walls covered in carvings, names etched deep into the rock, stretching endlessly. Thousands of names, some faded, some freshly carved, all marked with the same single word beside them: stayed. Mark's voice broke. "They're all passengers." And then, faintly, deeper in the tunnel, came the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. The conductor was coming. The footsteps echoed down the tunnel, steady and relentless, as if time itself moved in rhythm with the conductor. Jason raised his flashlight, its weak beam jittering across the stone walls. The endless list of names shimmered in the light, their carved letters slick with moisture, as if freshly cut. Lauren whispered, her voice trembling, "They're all the people who boarded, everyone who vanished." Mark pressed his hand against the wall, recoiling as if the stone burned. "Some of these dates, they go back centuries." The air grew colder. The sound of the footsteps drew nearer. Jason motioned for silence and led them deeper into the tunnel. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, each step heavier than the last. Then they saw it, a wooden door, rotted and half collapsed, barely clinging to its hinges. Jason shoved it open, and the three slipped inside. The room beyond was small, lined with wooden benches. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and dust coated everything. But on the center bench sat a single object, a leather-bound book. Its cover was cracked, its pages yellowed. Lauren approached cautiously, her hands shaking. Another logbook. Jason opened it. The pages were filled with neat, spidery handwriting, names, dates, and destinations, but the last page was blank until the ink began to seep through on its own. Slowly, 3 new lines formed: Jason Moore, Lauren Wright, Mark Davis. Mark stumbled back, his face pale. "It knows we're here." Before Jason could respond, the lantern light spilled into the room, cutting through the cracks in the doorway. The footsteps stopped just outside. The conductor's voice rolled through the wood, low and commanding. "Final call." The door burst open. The conductor stepped inside, his blurred face illuminated by the lantern's pale fire. He raised his free hand, pointing directly at the book. The pages flipped violently, ink scrawling faster. Jason slammed it shut, clutching it to his chest. The ink bled through the cover, searing into his skin. He screamed, dropping it, the smell of burnt flesh filling the air. The conductor tilted his head, the faint grin stretching across his distorted face. All passengers board. The walls groaned, the benches rattled, The stone carvings outside began to glow, every name shining with faint light. From the cracks in the wall, pale hands pushed through, clawing at the air, reaching for them. Lauren shrieked, pulling Jason toward the back wall. There has to be another way. Mark spotted a narrow fissure, barely wide enough to crawl through. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees and wriggled inside. "Here, hurry!" Jason pushed Lauren forward, then scrambled after her. Behind them, the conductor's lantern flared, filling the room with blinding light. The hands burst fully through the walls, grasping at their clothes, their hair, their skin. They crawled through the fissure, scraping against jagged stone, lungs burning from the stench of coal and smoke. The light behind them grew dimmer, but the sound of the whistle rumbled once again, vibrating through the earth. At last they spilled out into another tunnel, collapsing onto damp ground. The air here was different, warmer, fresher. For a moment hope flickered. Lauren gasped, pointing ahead. "Light! There's an opening." They staggered toward it, desperate. But as they neared, they froze. The opening didn't reveal the town or the night sky. It revealed a platform, another platform, and waiting on the tracks, steam billowing, was the train. Its windows glowed brighter than ever, and this time every seat was filled with pale faces staring out. The platform stretched before them, impossibly pristine, as if untouched by time. Brass rails gleamed in the glow of old gas lamps, the tiled floor polished and spotless. But it was the train that drew their eyes, the same black locomotive, waiting patiently on the tracks. Its windows burned with pale light, and behind every pane sat a passenger. Dozens, hundreds, each one stared forward with hollow eyes, their blurred faces pressed close to the glass. Lauren's legs buckled. "We can't, not again." Jason grabbed her, forcing her upright. "It's trying to break us. We can't give in." Mark's voice was hoarse, his body trembling. "But where else do we go? Every tunnel leads back here. It's the only place we ever end up." The train hissed, steam pouring across the platform like rolling fog. Doors slid open in perfect unison, revealing the glowing interiors. The sound of shuffling footsteps filled the air, though none of the seated passengers moved. Then the conductor appeared at the far end. His lantern burned brighter than ever, searing against their eyes. His voice boomed, layered and inescapable. "Final boarding, all tickets claimed." The logbook appeared on a nearby bench, slamming open as if unseen hands had thrown it. Fresh ink bled across the page, filling in their names. Jason Moore, stayed. Lauren Wright, stayed. Mark Davis, stayed. Lauren screamed, clutching Jason's arm. "No, I'm not staying here." The whistle shrieked, deafening, rattling the entire platform. The train groaned, its frame trembling as though straining against the rails. Figures began to step from the open doors, not just passengers, but shadows in conductor uniforms, their blurred faces all glowing faintly. Each carried a lantern. Jason pulled the others back, but the shadows fanned out, circling them. "It won't stop," he whispered. "It won't ever stop." Mark's flashlight flickered, and for a moment the platform changed. He saw himself, Lauren, and Jason already seated inside the train, their faces pale and empty, staring through the glass. The image vanished, but the truth sank in. The train already had them. The air thickened, pressing against their chests, forcing them forward. The shadows closed in, guiding them toward the open doors. Jason fought with everything in him, dragging Lauren and Mark back. "We're not passengers," he roared. His voice echoed, defiant but fragile against the overwhelming noise. For a heartbeat, the platform fell silent. Then the conductor raised his lantern, and the pale fire inside erupted, flooding the space with blinding light. The ground shook violently, cracks spiderwebbing across the tiles. Steam roared from the engine, filling their lungs, choking them. Lauren screamed as invisible hands seized her arms, pulling her toward the nearest car. Mark staggered, his body twisting as the shadows clutched at his legs. Jason reached for them both, his throat raw from shouting. But the last thing they saw before the light swallowed them was the conductor's blurred face, grinning wide. The doors slammed shut. The whistle blew one final time, long and mournful. The train shuddered, then began to move, pulling away from the platform. Its windows glowed brighter as it vanished into the tunnel, carrying its newest passengers into the endless dark. When silence returned, the platform was empty once more. Only the faint echo of footsteps lingered, fading slowly into nothing. Hollowbrook Station still stands at the edge of town, its doors chained shut, its tracks swallowed by weeds. Yet on certain nights the air carries the long, mournful whistle of a train no one has seen in decades. Those who vanish near the station are never found, their names whispered as if already written in a book of passengers. Locals warn, if you see the lights of a train through the fog, don't follow them. Because once you board, you never return.